When Peter dragged that burlap sack through the dusty streets of Redemption Gulch, his small hands trembled, not just from the weight of what he carried, but from the pain that tore through his chest like a sharp blade. The midday sun beat down mercilessly, but nothing compared to the fire burning in his 12-year-old eyes. Inside that sack was the bloodied axe that had taken the life of the only person who truly loved him in this cruel world. The boy stopped for a moment, wiping the sweat that ran down his thin, dirty face. His torn clothes told the story of a stolen childhood, of dreams shattered on a morning that had begun like any other. He didn't know where to go, didn't know what to do. All he knew was that Denzel, the man his mother had trusted to protect them, had become the monster who destroyed everything. Redemption Gulch was a town that promised redemption in its name, but delivered only despair. The dirt streets were silent witnesses to countless tragedies, and now Peter had become one more of them. The hot wind lifted small dust devils as if the earth itself wept for the injustices it witnessed. Across the street, leaning against the porch of the Last Breath saloon, Jhoenel watched the scene with eyes that had seen too much in this life. At 45 years old, the gunslinger carried scars that went far beyond the skin. His worn leather hat protected a face marked by time and difficult decisions, but his eyes still shone with a flame that many men lost over the years. It was the flame of true justice. Jhoenel had arrived in Redemption Gulch just 3 days earlier, following rumors about a new gang that was terrorizing the region. He wasn't the type who looked for trouble, but he also wasn't a man to run when injustice knocked at his door. And at that moment, seeing that lost boy carrying a burden no child should carry, he knew fate had placed something important in his path. The gunslinger stepped away from the porch with firm but careful steps. He had learned over the years that approaching a wounded child required more delicacy than disarming a bandit. Peter was so lost in his pain that he didn't notice the shadow approaching until he felt a gentle hand rest on his shoulder. "Son, are you all right?" Jhoenel's voice was deep, but carried a tenderness that Peter hadn't heard in a long time. The boy turned quickly, clutching the sack to his chest as if protecting a treasure. His eyes, red from crying so much, met Jhoenel's, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. It was as if two wounded souls recognized each other amid the chaos. I have nowhere to go," Peter murmured. His voice choked. "He killed her. He killed my mother." Jhoenel felt something break inside his chest. There was something in those eyes that reminded him of himself when he was young, when he still believed the world was a fair place. But he also saw something more, an inner strength that not even tragedy had been able to completely break. "What's your name, boy?" Peter Thompson. "And who was it that did this to your mother, Peter?" The boy hesitated, looking around as if fearing someone might be listening. Redemption Gulch seemed like a ghost town at that moment, but Peter had learned that walls had ears, and danger could be hidden around any corner. "Denzel, my stepfather. He changed after those men came to town, said he was now part of something bigger, something that would make us a lot of money." The words came out broken as if each one cut his throat. "But my mother found out things, bad things they were doing, and when she said she was going to tell the sheriff..." Peter couldn't finish the sentence. The sack slipped from his hands and fell to the ground with a muffled sound that made Jhoenel immediately understand what was happening. The gunslinger knelt beside the boy, placing both hands on his shoulders. "Listen well, Peter. There are moments in life when the world seems to have lost all meaning, when the darkness is so deep we can't see even a ray of light. But it's precisely in those moments that we discover what we're really made of." Jhoenel looked directly into the boy's eyes. "Your mother didn't die in vain if you choose to honor her memory by doing the right thing." At that moment, as if fate wanted to test the determination of both, 3 men came out of the Last Breath saloon. They were members of the gang that had recently arrived in town, known as the Desert Serpents. Their faces were marked by violence, and their eyes gleamed with the cruelty of those who had long ago lost any trace of humanity. The group's leader, a tall, thin man with a scar running from his forehead to his chin, stopped when he saw Peter and Jhoenel. His name was Marcus Jawbone Sullivan, and his reputation for cruelty spread throughout the territory like a plague. Beside him were two of his most loyal men, Tom Ironhand and Billy Snakeeye. "Well, well, if it isn't little Peter," Jawbone said with a smile that chilled the blood. "Denzel was looking for you, boy. Said you ran away from home with something that doesn't belong to you." Jhoenel stood slowly, positioning himself between Peter and the three men. His right hand rested casually near his holster, a movement that didn't go unnoticed by the bandits. "The boy is with me now," Jhoenel said with a calm that contrasted with the tension in the air. "And from what I see, you're the new owners of the town. I must say I'm not impressed." Jawbone laughed, a sound harsh as broken glass. "And who do you think you are, stranger? This town now belongs to the Desert Serpents. Everything and everyone here is our property." "Funny," Jhoenel replied, slightly adjusting his hat. "I always believed freedom wasn't something that could be bought or sold, but maybe you have a different view of things." The tension in the air was palpable. Peter could feel his heart beating so hard, it seemed like it would burst from his chest. He had seen what those men were capable of, had witnessed the coldness with which they took lives, as if they were just numbers in an account book. Tom Ironhand stepped forward, his hand already resting on the butt of his weapon. "You're making a very big mistake, friend. That boy has something that belongs to our partner Denzel, and we always collect our debts." "The only debt I see here," Jhoenel said, his voice taking on a colder tone, "is the one you have with justice. And I have the impression that account has been overdue for a long time." Billy Snakeeye spat on the ground, his small, cruel eyes fixed on Peter. The boy saw things he shouldn't have seen. That could be a problem for our business. It was then that Jhoenel understood the true dimension of what was happening. This wasn't just about a crime of passion or a domestic fight that had gotten out of control. Peter had become a witness to something much bigger, something that could expose the entire Desert Serpents operation in Redemption Gulch. "Peter," Jhoenel said, without taking his eyes off the three men, "I want you to go to the church and wait for me there. Father Miguel will take care of you." "But Go now, son, and take the sack with you." The boy hesitated for a moment, but something in Jhoenel's voice reassured him. There was a strength there, a certainty that Peter hadn't felt since his mother was alive. He picked up the sack and started running toward the church, his bare feet raising small clouds of dust. Jawbone gestured for his men not to follow the boy. He was more interested in the stranger who dared to challenge them in broad daylight. "You just signed your death warrant, friend. Nobody interferes with Desert Serpents' business and lives to tell the story." "Maybe," Jhoenel replied, adjusting his foot position almost imperceptibly. "But I've always believed some things are worth more than life itself, and protecting an innocent child is one of them." What happened next was so fast that the few residents watching from the safety of their homes could barely follow. Tom Ironhand was the first to draw his weapon, but Jhoenel was already in motion. The sound of gunshots echoed through the streets of Redemption Gulch like thunder in a summer storm. When the dust settled, Tom was on the ground, holding his wounded shoulder and groaning in pain. Billy Snakeeye had backed away, his weapon still in its holster, his eyes wide with surprise and fear. Jawbone remained standing, but his expression had changed completely. It was no longer the confident smile of someone who controlled the situation. "You're fast," Jawbone admitted, but his voice carried a veiled threat. "But speed isn't everything in this business. We are many, and you're just one man. One man with a just cause is worth 10 without purpose," Jhoenel replied, reloading his weapon with precise movements. "And I have the impression you lost your purpose a long time ago." Jawbone helped Tom to his feet, his eyes never leaving Jhoenel's gaze. "This isn't over, stranger. Not by a long shot. You have no idea what you just started." "Maybe not," Jhoenel said, holstering his weapon, "but I know exactly why I started it." The three men walked away, Tom being supported by the other two. But before disappearing around the corner, Jawbone turned one last time. "You have until sunset tomorrow to leave town, stranger. After that, there won't be a place in the entire territory where you can hide from us." Jhoenel watched the three men walk away, knowing he had crossed a line from which there would be no return. But when he thought of Peter's desperate look, he knew he had made the right choice. Some battles needed to be fought, regardless of the consequences. He headed to the church, where he found Peter sitting in the first pew, still clutching the sack to his chest. Father Miguel, an elderly man with white hair and kind eyes, was beside the boy, offering words of comfort. "Father," Jhoenel said, removing his hat in respect, "I need your help." "Of course, my son. Peter told me what happened. It's a terrible tragedy." Jhoenel knelt in front of Peter, looking directly into his eyes. "Peter, I need you to tell me everything you know about Denzel and those men. Everything your mother discovered. Everything you saw or heard. It might be our only chance for justice." The boy took a deep breath, as if preparing to dive into deep waters. "They're not just thieves, Mr. Jhoenel. They do worse things, much worse." "What kind of things, son?" "They bring people from other places, people nobody will miss, and they make those people work in the abandoned silver mines without paying anything, without letting them leave." Peter stopped, swallowing hard. "My mother saw when they brought an entire family, children too, and when someone tries to escape..." The boy couldn't finish, but Jhoenel understood. The Desert Serpents weren't just a common gang. They were involved in slave labor, a practice that had become more common in remote regions of the West, where the law had difficulty reaching. "Your mother was a brave woman, Peter, and you inherited that courage from her. But what good is courage if I can't do anything? I'm just a child." Jhoenel placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. "Sometimes the greatest courage lies in surviving, in continuing to fight even when everything seems lost. Your mother didn't die so you would give up. She died so you could have the chance to make a difference." Father Miguel approached, his expression grave. "Jhoenel, if what the boy is saying is true, then we're dealing with something much bigger than we imagined. The Desert Serpents have connections in several towns. They're organized, well-armed, and completely without scruples." "I know, Father. That's why I'm going to need help." "What kind of help?" Jhoenel stood walking to the church window. Outside, Redemption Gulch seemed peaceful under the afternoon sun, but he knew it was just an illusion. The storm was forming, and when it came, it would be devastating. "I know two men who can help us, Cole Brennan and Wyatt Stone. We fought together in some battles in the past. They're men of honor, skilled gunslingers, and more importantly, they hate injustice as much as I do. Do you think they'll come? If I send the right message, they'll come." Jhoenel turned to Peter. "But first, I need to make sure you're safe. The Desert Serpents won't give up easily." Peter stood, still holding the sack. "I want to help. I want them to pay for what they did to my mother. And they will pay, Peter. But revenge and justice are different things. Revenge is born from anger and only brings more pain. Justice is born from love and brings peace." Jhoenel knelt again in front of the boy. "Your mother wouldn't want to see you consumed by anger. She would want to see you grow strong, honorable, and capable of protecting others who need help." Tears began to flow down Peter's face, but this time, they weren't just tears of pain. There was something more there, a mixture of hope and determination that Jhoenel recognized immediately. "What do I do with this?" Peter asked, pointing to the sack. "We're going to turn it over to the sheriff as evidence, but first we'll make sure the sheriff is on our side." Father Miguel shook his head. "I'm afraid Sheriff Morrison isn't trustworthy, Jhoenel. There are rumors he's receiving money from the Desert Serpents to turn a blind eye to their activities. Then we'll have to be our own law," Jhoenel said, his voice carrying iron determination. "At least until better men can take control." At that moment, the sound of approaching horses made everyone turn to the window. 5 men on horseback stopped in front of the church, all clearly members of the Desert Serpents. In front was Denzel, Peter's stepfather, a man of ordinary appearance who had transformed into something monstrous. "Peter!" Denzel shouted. "I know you're in there. Come out now and nobody gets hurt." Peter cowered behind Jhoenel, his body trembling with fear. Seeing the man who had killed his mother there, free and threatening, brought back all the pain and terror of that terrible morning. "Stay calm, son," Jhoenel murmured. "He won't touch you while I'm alive." Father Miguel went to the church door. "This is God's house, Denzel. You have no right to come here making threats." "Shut up, old man," Denzel shouted. "I just want the boy and what he took. After that, you'll never see us again." "Liar," Peter whispered. He said the same thing to my mother before. Jhoenel placed his hand on the boy's shoulder, transmitting strength and security. Peter, I want you to go to the back of the church and hide in the sacristy. Don't come out until I come get you. But what about you? I'm going to have a conversation with your stepfather. Peter hesitated, but the firmness in Jhoenel's voice convinced him. He ran to the back of the church, taking the sack with him. Father Miguel accompanied him, ensuring the boy was safe. Jhoenel checked his weapons one last time before heading to the church door. Outside, Denzel and his companions waited, their faces marked by impatience and barely contained violence. So you're the stranger causing problems, Denzel said when Jhoenel appeared at the door. Jawbone told me about you, said you're fast with guns. Fast enough, Jhoenel replied, descending the church steps with measured steps. But more important than that, I'm a man who keeps his word, and I promise to protect that boy. The boy is my stepson. He comes with me, not after what you did to his mother. Denzel laughed, but it was a laugh without humor. The woman was meddling where she shouldn't. She discovered things about our business and threatened to turn us in. I had no choice. There's always a choice, Denzel. You chose money over family. You chose violence over love. And now you'll have to live with the consequences of those choices. The only consequences I'll have to face are deciding what to do with your body after I kill you. The other four men laughed, but Jhoenel noticed that some of them seemed nervous. The story of how he had faced 3 gang members earlier had already spread, and his reputation was growing rapidly. Before we start this dance, Jhoenel said, adjusting his foot position, I want you to know something. I sent messages to 2 friends of mine, Cole Brennan and Wyatt Stone. Maybe you've heard of them. Denzel's expression changed slightly. Even in the most remote regions of the West, the names of Cole Brennan and Wyatt Stone were known. They were living legends, men whose skill with weapons was surpassed only by their reputation for never backing down from injustice. You're bluffing, Denzel said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. Maybe. But are you willing to bet your life on it? For a moment, silence took over the scene. The hot desert wind blew between the men, raising small clouds of dust that danced in the air like ghosts. It was the kind of moment that defined destinies, that separated men from boys, the brave from the cowards. It was Denzel who broke the silence, drawing his weapon with a sudden movement. But Jhoenel was already in motion, his hand finding the grip of his Colt with the precision of years of practice. The sound of gunshots echoed through the town like thunder, and when it was all over, Denzel was on the ground, looking at the sky with eyes that saw nothing more. The other 4 men hesitated, their weapons half drawn, uncertain about what to do. Jhoenel remained standing, his weapon still smoking, but his eyes were already focused on the next targets. You have a choice, he said, his voice calm despite the tension. You can try to kill me and probably die in the process, or you can leave and tell Jawbone that Redemption Gulch is no longer Desert Serpents territory. One of the men, younger than the others, lowered his weapon. I didn't sign up for this, guys. I'm not going to die because of a boy. He spurred his horse and rode away, leaving the other 3 in an even more difficult situation. The desertion of a companion had broken the group's unity, and Jhoenel could see doubt growing in their eyes. 2 against 1 are still good odds, one of the remaining men said, trying to regain confidence. 3 against 1, a familiar voice corrected. Everyone turned to see Cole Brennan emerging from behind the saloon, his imposing figure unmistakable even at a distance. At 50 years old, Cole was still one of the most feared men in the West, his graying beard and cold blue eyes being the trademark of a living legend. Cole, Jhoenel said, without taking his eyes off the 3 remaining men, you arrived earlier than expected. I got your message last night, rode all night. Cole positioned himself beside Jhoenel, his hand resting casually near his weapon. Wyatt is on his way too, should arrive before nightfall. Cole's arrival completely changed the dynamics of the situation. The 3 Desert Serpents men looked at each other, clearly realizing the odds had become too unfavorable to risk. This isn't over, one of them said, but his voice lacked conviction. Jawbone won't let this pass. Then tell Jawbone he knows where to find us, Cole replied, but also warn him that next time you come, you better bring an army. The three men mounted their horses and left, leaving Denzel's body in the dust of the main street. Jhoenel holstered his weapon and turned to Cole, extending his hand in greeting. Thanks for coming, old friend. No need to thank me. When you said there was a child involved, I knew it was serious. Cole looked at Denzel's body. That was the boy's stepfather? Was. A man who lost his soul in exchange for dirty money. And the boy? How is he? Scared, hurt, but strong. Stronger than he imagines. Jhoenel looked toward the church. He's going to need time to heal, but there's something in him. Something special. Cole nodded, understanding. Both had seen many orphaned children over the years, victims of the violence that plagued the West. But some of them had a special spark, an inner strength that allowed them not just to survive, but to thrive despite adversity. And what about the Desert Serpents? You said in the message they're involved in slave labor. According to what Peter told me, they have an operation in the abandoned silver mines. They bring entire families from other places and force them to work without payment. Those who try to escape, I understand. Cole spat on the ground, his expression hardening. That kind of scum needs to be eliminated from the face of the earth. I agree, but we have to be smart. They're many, well-organized, and have connections in several towns. We can't just go in shooting. So what's the plan? Before Jhoenel could answer, Peter appeared at the church door, followed by Father Miguel. The boy ran toward Jhoenel, stopping only when he saw Denzel's body in the street. Is he dead? Peter asked, his voice a mixture of relief and sadness. Yes, son. He won't hurt anyone anymore. Peter stood looking at the body for a long moment, processing what that meant. Denzel had been the man his mother loved, the man who should have protected them, but he was also the man who had destroyed everything Peter considered sacred. I should be happy, Peter said finally, but I just feel empty. Jhoenel knelt beside the boy, placing a hand on his shoulder. That's normal, Peter. Death is never cause for joy, even when it's necessary. What you're feeling shows you have a good heart, a heart your mother would be proud to see. Cole approached, removing his hat in respect. You must be Peter. My name is Cole Brennan. I'm a friend of Jhoenel's. Peter looked at Cole with curiosity. There was something about the older man that inspired confidence, a solidity that reminded him of ancient, unshakable mountains. Mr. Brennan, are you going to help us stop the bad men? We're going to do more than that, boy. We're going to make sure they can never hurt anyone again. Father Miguel joined the group, his expression worried. Gentlemen, I appreciate what you're doing, but I fear this is just the beginning. The Desert Serpents won't accept this affront passively. I know, Father, Jhoenel said. That's why we need to act fast. We have to find where they're keeping the slave workers and free them before Jawbone has time to reorganize his forces. But how are we going to find them? The territory is vast, and they could be hidden anywhere. Peter stepped forward, his voice gaining strength. I know where they are. Everyone turned to look at the boy, surprised. How do you know, son? Jhoenel asked. Because Denzel took me there once. Said he wanted to show me where we were going to get rich. Peter swallowed hard, the memories clearly painful. It's at the old Hartwell family silver mines about 10 miles north of town. There's a hidden trail that leads there. Cole and Jhoenel looked at each other, both recognizing the importance of the information. Peter, Jhoenel said carefully, do you remember how many men were there? What was the security like? There were many armed men, maybe 15 or 20, and they had guards at high points watching all the entrances. Peter stopped, his expression becoming even darker. And there were families there, children my age, some even younger. They looked so scared. The anger Jhoenel felt at that moment was almost overwhelming. The idea of children being forced to work in inhuman conditions, away from their families, deprived of their childhood and freedom, awakened in him a fury he hadn't felt in a long time. We're going to get them out of there, he said, his voice loaded with determination. All of them. But how? Father Miguel asked. You're just 2 men against 20 or more. 3 men, a new voice corrected. Everyone turned to see Wyatt Stone approaching on horseback. At 42 years old, Wyatt was the youngest of the 3 gunslingers, but his reputation was equally impressive. His blonde hair and green eyes contrasted with the seriousness of his expression, and the two Colts he carried on his hips were known for their deadly precision. "Wyatt," Jhoenel said, a smile appearing on his face for the first time in days. "Now we're complete." Wyatt dismounted and greeted his friends, then knelt in front of Peter. "You must be the brave boy Jhoenel wrote about. It's a pleasure to meet you, Peter." Peter was impressed by the gentleness in Wyatt's voice. Despite his intimidating appearance, there was something paternal in his eyes that made the boy feel safe. "Now that we're all here," Cole said, "we can start planning how we're going to deal with the Desert Serpents." "First," Jhoenel said, "we need to scout the terrain. Peter gave us valuable information, but we need to see the situation with our own eyes." "And then?" Wyatt asked. "Then we're going to show Jawbone and his men that there are some lines that shouldn't be crossed, and that when they are crossed, there's always a price to pay." The sun was beginning to set on the horizon, painting the sky of Redemption Gulch with shades of orange and red. It was a beautiful sunset, but Jhoenel knew the beauty of the moment was deceptive. The storm was coming, and when it arrived, it would forever change the destiny of that small town and everyone who lived in it. Peter looked at the three men who had become his protectors, feeling for the first time since his mother's death that maybe there was hope. They were different from anyone he had ever met. Strong, determined, but also gentle and just. "Mr. Jhoenel," Peter said, his voice small but firm, "when all this is over, what's going to happen to me?" Jhoenel looked at the boy, seeing in him not just an orphaned child, but someone who could become an extraordinary man with the right guidance. "That depends on you, Peter. But if you want, you can stay with me. I can teach you to defend yourself, to distinguish right from wrong, to be the kind of man your mother would want you to be." Tears welled up in Peter's eyes, but this time they were tears of gratitude and hope. "I would like that very much, sir." "Then it's decided." Jhoenel placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. "But first we have a job to do, and you, Peter, are going to have an important role in it." "I am." "Yes, because you're the only person here who knows the way to the mines, and more important than that, you're living proof that the Desert Serpents can be defeated." As night fell over Redemption Gulch, four figures gathered in the church to plan a mission that would determine not only the future of the town, but the destiny of dozens of innocent people awaiting freedom in the dark depths of the abandoned mines. Dawn came cold and silent to Redemption Gulch, as if nature itself was holding its breath before the approaching storm. Jhoenel woke before sunrise, as had been his custom for more than 20 years. The habit had been forged on battlefields and perfected in years of frontier life, where the difference between life and death often depended on a few precious minutes of advantage. Peter slept on an improvised mattress in the church sacristy, finally resting after days of terror and uncertainty. Jhoenel watched the boy for a moment, seeing in the peaceful expression of his face a glimpse of the child he still was, despite everything he had been through. It was a sight that strengthened his determination. Some things in life were worth any sacrifice to protect. Cole and Wyatt were already awake, checking their weapons and equipment with the meticulousness of men who knew a mistake could cost lives. The friendship between the three had been forged in similar situations where mutual trust was the only thing standing between them and death. "Sleep well?" Cole asked when Jhoenel approached. "Enough. And you?" "As always," Wyatt replied, adjusting the holster of one of his Colts. "I dreamed about those children in the mines. Couldn't get the image of them working in the dark, afraid, away from their families, out of my head. Today that changes," Jhoenel said, with a determination that admitted no doubt. "Today they go home." Father Miguel appeared carrying a tray with hot coffee and fresh bread. Despite the tension of the situation, the elderly man maintained his routine of caring for those under his protection. "Eat something," he said, placing the tray on an improvised table. "You're going to need strength for what's ahead." "Thank you, Father," Jhoenel said, accepting a cup of coffee. The hot liquid went down his throat like a blessing, warming not just his body, but also his soul. "Will you take care of Peter while we're away?" "Of course." But are you sure you don't want to wait for reinforcements? Maybe the army... The army would take weeks to get here if it came at all, Cole interrupted. And even if it did, the Desert Serpents would have enough time to kill all the witnesses and disappear into the desert. Besides, Wyatt added, 3 men can move faster and more discreetly than an entire platoon. Sometimes precision is worth more than brute force. Peter stirred on his mattress, slowly waking up. When his eyes opened, and he saw the 3 men preparing to leave, the reality of the situation returned like a cold wave. "You're really going to do this?" he said. It wasn't a question, but a statement. "We are," Jhoenel confirmed, kneeling beside the boy. "But you don't need to worry, we're coming back." "What if you don't?" The question hung in the air like a shadow. It was the question everyone was thinking, but no one had verbalized until that moment. "If we don't come back," Jhoenel said carefully, "Father Miguel will take care of you until we can arrange for a good family to adopt you. But that's not going to happen, Peter. We're coming back, and we're bringing all those people with us." Peter sat up, his expression serious beyond his 12 years. "I want to go with you." "No," Jhoenel said immediately. "It's too dangerous. But I know the way better than anyone. What if you get lost? What if you need someone who knows where the secret entrances are?" Cole and Wyatt looked at each other, recognizing the logic in the boy's argument, but also understanding the risks involved. "Peter," Wyatt said, his voice gentle but firm, "you've already been through enough trauma. We don't want to expose you to more violence." "Violence has already found me," Peter replied, his voice gaining strength. "It killed my mother, destroyed my family, changed my life forever. I can't pretend it doesn't exist just because you want to protect me." Jhoenel studied the boy's face, seeing there a determination that reminded him of himself when he was young. There was something in Peter that went beyond the thirst for revenge. It was a genuine desire to make a difference, to transform his pain into something positive. "If you come with us," Jhoenel said finally, "you'll have to promise to do exactly what we say, when we say it. No heroics, no trying to prove you're brave. Your only function will be to guide us there and then stay safe while we do the work. I promise. And if at any point we tell you to run, you run. Don't look back. Don't try to help. Just run. Understood?" "Understood." Cole shook his head, but there was a smile on his lips. "This boy reminds me of someone I knew a long time ago, stubborn as a mule and brave as a lion." "Who?" Peter asked, curious. "Jhoenel, when he was your age." Wyatt laughed, a low, warm laugh. "Cole's right. You have the same determined look Jhoenel had when he decided he was going to become a gunslinger." "Have you known each other that long?" Peter asked. "More than 20 years, Jhoenel replied. "We fought together in the war, then met again a few times when justice needed a helping hand, and we always came out victorious," Cole added. "We're not going to break that tradition now." Father Miguel watched the conversation, with a mixture of concern and admiration. There was something almost mythical about those 3 men, as if they were figures from the legends people told around campfires. But at the same time, he could see the humanity in them, the compassion that motivated them to risk their lives for strangers. "May God protect you," he said, making the sign of the cross. "And may you bring back all those innocent souls." "Amen," Jhoenel replied, surprising everyone, including himself. It had been a long time since he had spoken that word, but something about the situation seemed to require all possible help, earthly or divine. The group finished preparing in silence, each man lost in his own thoughts. Peter watched everything carefully, absorbing every detail of the gunslinger's preparation routine. There was an almost ritual precision in the way they checked their weapons, adjusted their equipment, and mentally prepared for what was to come. "It's time," Jhoenel said finally, putting his hat on his head. They left the church just as the sun began to appear on the horizon, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and gold. Redemption Gulch was still sleeping, its empty streets witnessing only the silent departure of 4 mounted figures. Peter rode beside Jhoenel on a small but sturdy horse that Father Miguel had managed to borrow. The boy felt strange mounted again. The last time he had ridden was with Denzel, on a trip he now knew had been to show him the place where his mother would be killed if she discovered too much about the gang's activities. "Where exactly are we going?" Wyatt asked as they rode along the trail leading out of town. "There's an old mining road that leads to the mountains," Peter explained, pointing north. "But it was abandoned years ago, after the silver ran out. The Desert Serpents chose that place because nobody goes there anymore." "Smart," Cole admitted. "Isolated place, difficult access, away from curious eyes. Perfect for illegal operations." "How do they transport the workers there?" Jhoenel asked. Denzel said they bring people at night, in covered wagons. They make it look like they're just traveling merchants. Peter stopped, swallowing hard. He said people don't even know what's happening until it's too late. The anger Jhoenel felt grew with each new piece of information. The cruelty of the Desert Serpents went beyond simple greed. There was a calculated evil in their methods that revealed truly lost souls. They rode in silence for more than an hour, following increasingly narrow and abandoned trails. The landscape around them gradually changed, the arid plains giving way to rocky hills covered with sparse vegetation. It was wild territory, where the law of men rarely reached and justice depended on individual strength and determination. "There," Peter said finally, pointing to a narrow passage between two rock formations. "That's how you get to the mines." Jhoenel studied the terrain with experienced eyes. The passage was a natural bottleneck, easy to defend but also easy to block. If the Desert Serpents had guards posted there, it would be almost impossible to pass unnoticed. "Is there any other way to get there?" he asked. Peter thought for a moment. "There's an older trail, more difficult, that goes around the mountains on the east side." Denzel said it was too dangerous to use, but maybe... "Show us," Cole said. "We prefer the danger of nature to the danger of men." They changed direction, following Peter along a trail that barely deserved that name. It was more of a goat path, winding through steep slopes and rocky passages that tested both the rider's skill and the animal's endurance. "Be careful here," Peter warned when they reached a particularly narrow passage. "The rocks are loose and the precipice is deep." They dismounted and led the horses on foot through the most dangerous passage, each step calculated to avoid a fall that would be fatal. The wind blew strong between the rocks, creating a haunting sound that seemed to echo the cries of lost souls. After almost 2 hours of difficult climbing, they finally reached a point where they could see the valley where the old Hartwell mines were located. What they saw left them silent for a long moment. The complex was larger than they had imagined. There were several wooden structures scattered throughout the valley, some clearly original constructions from the mining era, others obviously added recently by the Desert Serpents. Smoke rose from several chimneys, indicating the place was very active. But what most shocked the 4 observers were the people. Even at a distance, they could see dozens of figures moving through the complex, some clearly armed guards, others obviously forced workers. There were men, women, and, to everyone's horror, children. "My God," Wyatt murmured. "How many people do they have down there?" "At least 50, Cole estimated, using a small telescope to observe better. "Maybe more, and I see at least 15 armed guards." Peter watched the scene with a mixture of horror and determination. Seeing those people in captivity, especially the children, brought back all the emotions he had felt when he discovered what was really happening. "How are we going to get all those people out of there?" he asked. "First, we need a plan," Jhoenel said, studying the terrain. "We can't just go down shooting. There are too many innocents who could get hurt in the crossfire. What if we create a distraction?" Wyatt suggested. "Something that makes the guards concentrate on one point, while we free the prisoners from another side." "Could work," Cole agreed. "But we need to be sure we know where they're keeping the people and what's the best escape route." Peter pointed to a series of barracks on the west side of the complex. "Denzel showed me where they keep the workers. It's those buildings there. They lock everyone up at night and only let them out during the day to work." "And the guards? Where are they posted?" "There are watchtowers there, and there." Peter indicated 3 strategic points. "And there are always guards patrolling the perimeter." Denzel said they take shifts every 4 hours. Jhoenel observed the movement in the complex, noting the patrol patterns and weak points in security. His military mind, forged in years of combat, was already formulating a plan. Here's what we're going to do, he said finally. Wyatt, you're going to circle the valley on the north side and position yourself near that watchtower. When I give the signal, you eliminate the guard and create as much confusion as possible. Understood. Cole, you go down the south side and position yourself near the barracks. When the confusion starts, you free the prisoners and guide them to the escape trail. And you? Cole asked. I'm going straight to the center of the complex. I'm going to look for Jawbone and try to end this once and for all. That's too risky, Wyatt protested. You'll be alone against 15 men or more. Not alone, Jhoenel said, looking at Peter. The boy is going to help me. No, Cole and Wyatt said at the same time. Listen, Jhoenel said, raising his hand to silence them. Peter knows the layout of the complex better than any of us. He can guide me through the safest paths and show me where Jawbone is likely to be. But he's just a child, Wyatt insisted. A child who has already seen more violence than many adult men, Jhoenel replied, and a child who deserves the chance to help free other children who are going through the same suffering. Peter stepped forward, his voice firm despite the fear he felt. I want to do this. I need to do this. For my mother, for those children down there, for myself. Cole studied the boy's face for a long moment, seeing there a determination that reminded him of other brave young people he had known over the years. Finally, he nodded. All right, but at the first sign of real danger, you get the boy out of there, Jhoenel, no matter what's happening. Promised. They spent the next hour refining the plan details, studying the terrain and synchronizing their movements. Each man checked his weapons one last time, knowing that soon their lives would depend on the precision and speed of their shots. Remember, Jhoenel said when they were ready to separate, our main objective is to save the innocents. Everything else is secondary. And if we find Jawbone? Wyatt asked. If we find Jawbone, we do justice, but not at the cost of innocent lives. They separated, each following his designated route. Peter rode beside Jhoenel, his heart beating so hard it seemed like it would burst from his chest. But along with the fear, there was something more, a sense of purpose he had never felt before. Mr. Jhoenel, he said as they carefully descended the slope. Can I ask a question? Of course, son. Why do you do this? Why do you risk your lives for people you don't even know? Jhoenel thought about the question for a moment before answering. Because someone has to do it, Peter. The world is full of people who look the other way when they see injustice, who pretend not to see others suffering. But if everyone did that, if nobody cared enough to act, then darkness would win. But aren't you afraid? Of course we're afraid. Any sensible man would be afraid in a situation like this. But courage isn't the absence of fear, Peter. Courage is doing the right thing despite the fear. They reached the perimeter of the complex without being detected, hiding behind a pile of rocks that offered a clear view of the barracks where the prisoners were being held. Up close, the situation seemed even more desperate. They could see people through the barracks windows. Men, women, and children crowded into small, dirty spaces, their clothes torn and their faces marked by exhaustion and despair. Some of the children didn't look older than 8 or 9 years old. How can anyone do this? Peter whispered, his voice full of anger and sadness. Because they lost their humanity, Jhoenel replied. Because they chose money over compassion, power over justice. A guard passed near their hiding place, and both crouched down even lower. The man was big and brutish, with scars that told the story of a life of violence. He carried a rifle and had a cruel expression that left no doubt about his willingness to use force. Where is Jawbone's office? Jhoenel whispered. Peter pointed to a larger building in the center of the complex. There, that's where Denzel said he stays most of the time, counting money and planning new business. Jhoenel studied the building, noting there were at least 3 guards posted around it. Getting there without being detected would be almost impossible unless... Peter, I need you to do something very dangerous, but if you don't feel capable, tell me now. What is it? I need you to let yourself be captured. Peter's eyes widened. What? Listen, if you appear alone, they'll want to take you directly to Jawbone. After all, you're an important witness, someone who can cause problems for them. That will give me the opportunity to follow them and get to him. But what if they kill me right away? They won't. You're too valuable alive. They'll want to interrogate you first, find out what you know and who else might be involved. Peter swallowed hard, the fear evident in his eyes. But after a moment he nodded. All right, I'll do it. Are you sure? I am, but promise you won't leave me there. I promise, Peter. No matter what happens, I'm going to get you out of there. Peter took a deep breath, mentally preparing for what he was about to do. Then, before he could change his mind, he stood up and started walking toward the complex, his hands raised in surrender. "Don't shoot!" he shouted. "I surrender!" The reaction was immediate. Guards appeared from all sides, their weapons pointed at the boy. Jhoenel watched from the shadows, his hand resting on the grip of his Colt, ready to act if something went wrong. "Well, well," said one of the guards, a short, fat man with rotten teeth. "If it isn't little Peter, Jawbone is going to be very happy to see you." "Where have you been hiding, boy?" another guard asked, grabbing Peter by the arm with unnecessary force. "In the mountains," Peter replied, trying to seem scared, which wasn't difficult. "But I couldn't find food. I'm hungry and cold." "You're going to have much more to worry about than hunger and cold," the first guard laughed. "Jawbone has some questions for you." They started dragging Peter toward the central building, exactly as Jhoenel had predicted. He followed them through the shadows, moving from hiding place to hiding place with the skill of a ghost. Meanwhile, at other points in the complex, Cole and Wyatt were positioning themselves for their parts of the plan. Cole had reached near the barracks and could hear the low voices of the prisoners through the thin walls. There was despair in those voices, but also a spark of hope that hadn't been completely extinguished. Wyatt had climbed to a position that gave him a clear view of the North Watchtower. The guard was relaxed, clearly not expecting trouble. It was a mistake that would cost dearly. Back at the center of the complex, Peter was being led into the building where Jawbone kept his office. The interior was surprisingly luxurious for such a remote location. There was expensive furniture, oriental rugs, and even some artwork on the walls. It was clear that the slave labor business was being very profitable. Jawbone was sitting behind a large desk, counting stacks of money with the concentration of a banker. When the guards brought Peter, he looked up and smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes and made Peter's blood freeze. "Peter Thompson," Jawbone said, his voice soft but loaded with threat. "What an unexpected pleasure. I was wondering when you would show up. I had nowhere to go," Peter stammered, playing the role of a scared and lost child. "Of course you didn't. After all, you're an orphan now, aren't you? What a terrible tragedy what happened to your mother. And to Denzel, too." Peter felt anger grow inside him, hearing Jawbone speak about his mother with that false compassion, but he forced himself to maintain the act. "I just want a place to stay," he said. "I won't cause trouble." Jawbone laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Oh, but you've already caused trouble, my young friend. A lot of trouble. You saw things you shouldn't have seen. You know things you shouldn't know. I won't tell anyone. I promise." Promises are fragile things, Peter, especially promises made by scared children. Jawbone stood and walked around the desk, stopping in front of Peter. "But maybe we can reach an agreement." "What kind of agreement?" "You work for me. Do what I say when I say it without asking questions. In exchange, I let you live." Peter pretended to consider the offer, buying time for Jhoenel to position himself. "And if I say no? Then you'll join your mother much sooner than expected." It was at that moment that Jhoenel decided to act. He had positioned himself outside the office window and could clearly see the situation inside. There were 3 guards besides Jawbone, all armed, but none of them were expecting an attack. Jhoenel broke the window with the butt of his weapon and jumped into the office before anyone could react. His first shot hit the nearest guard in the shoulder, knocking him down. The second shot was a warning, hitting the wall just above Jawbone's head. "Nobody move!" Jhoenel shouted, his weapon now pointed directly at Jawbone. The Desert Serpents leader looked at Jhoenel with a mixture of surprise and anger. "You must be the stranger who's been causing so many problems. And you must be the worm who thinks he can buy and sell human lives like cattle." "Peter, come here," Jhoenel said without taking his eyes off Jawbone. The boy ran to Jhoenel's side, feeling safe for the first time since entering the complex. "You made a very big mistake coming here alone," Jawbone said, his confidence returning. "My men will surround you in a matter of minutes." "Your men are a little busy at the moment," Jhoenel replied. As if to confirm his words, the sound of gunshots began to echo from outside. Wyatt had eliminated the guard in the north tower and was creating the planned distraction, while Cole began freeing the prisoners. Jawbone's expression changed when he realized he was dealing with something much bigger than a lone gunslinger. "How many of you are there?" "Enough," Jhoenel replied. "Now you have a choice. You can surrender peacefully and maybe live to see a trial, or you can try to fight and die right here." "You don't understand," Jawbone said, his voice taking on a desperate tone. "This is bigger than you imagine. The Desert Serpents have connections throughout the territory. If you kill me, others will come, many others. Then we'll have to deal with them too." It was at that moment that one of the wounded guards tried to draw his weapon. Jhoenel reacted instinctively, his shot hitting the man in the chest before he could complete the movement. The sound of the shot echoed through the office like thunder. Jawbone took advantage of the distraction to draw his own weapon, but Peter was closer. The boy threw himself against Jawbone's legs, knocking him down at the exact moment he fired. The bullet grazed Jhoenel's head, shattering a mirror on the wall behind him. Jhoenel didn't hesitate. His next shot hit Jawbone in the chest, and the Desert Serpents leader fell backward, his weapon sliding from his hands. He looked at Jhoenel with eyes that were already beginning to lose focus. You don't know, Tut, what you've done," Jawbone murmured, blood flowing from his mouth. "They will come after. You let them come," Jhoenel replied. "We'll be waiting." Jawbone tried to say something more, but the words were lost in a final death rattle. The Desert Serpents leader was dead. Peter looked at the body, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Justice had been done, but it didn't bring back his mother or undo all the pain he had suffered. "Is it over?" he asked. "This part is," Jhoenel replied, reloading his weapon. "But we still have to get all those people out of here." They left the office to find the complex in total chaos. Cole had freed the prisoners and was organizing their evacuation, while Wyatt continued to keep the remaining guards busy with his deadly precision. "Jhoenel!" Cole shouted when he saw them. "We have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "There are more guards coming from the south camp, at least 10 men on horseback." Jhoenel looked around, quickly assessing the situation. The freed prisoners were panicking, running in all directions without coordination. Some of the original guards were still alive and shooting from defensive positions, and now there were reinforcements coming. "Peter," he said, kneeling in front of the boy, "I need you to do one more brave thing." "What? See those people over there?" Jhoenel pointed to a group of prisoners who were lost and confused near the barracks. "They need someone to guide them to the escape trail, someone who knows the way. But what about you? We're going to hold the guards here until everyone is safe. Then we'll meet you on the trail." Peter looked at the scared people, seeing among them several children who weren't much younger than him. They needed help, and he was the only person who could provide it. "All right," he said, his voice firm despite the fear. "I'll guide them." "That's my boy," Jhoenel said, placing his hand on Peter's shoulder. "Now go. And remember, don't stop for anything. No matter what happens here, you keep taking those people to safety." Peter ran toward the group of prisoners, shouting to get their attention. "This way. I know the way out of here." Some people hesitated, not knowing if they could trust a child, but an elderly woman with kind eyes, despite all the suffering she had endured, stepped forward. "You're just a boy," she said. "How can you help us?" "Because I know these mountains," Peter replied, "and because there are good men fighting to give us a chance to escape. We can't waste this chance." The woman looked into Peter's eyes and saw there a determination that went far beyond his age. "All right, son, we'll follow you." While Peter began guiding the group of prisoners toward the mountain trail, Jhoenel, Cole, and Wyatt prepared to face the approaching guards. It was a desperate situation, 3 men against more than 15, with the additional responsibility of protecting the escape of the innocents. "Well," Cole said, checking his weapons one last time, "we've been in worse situations." "When?" Wyatt asked, positioning himself behind a pile of wood that offered some protection. "I can't remember any at the moment," Cole admitted with a grim smile. "But I'm sure we have been." Jhoenel watched Peter and the prisoners disappearing on the mountain trail, feeling a mixture of pride and concern. The boy was showing extraordinary courage, but there was still much danger ahead. "They made it," he said to his companions. "Now we just need to give them enough time to get to safety." "And then?" Wyatt asked. "Then we show these bandits that there are some things in this world that can't be bought, sold, or stolen." The sound of horses was getting louder, and soon the three gunslingers could see the Desert Serpents guards appearing at the valley entrance. They were hard men accustomed to violence, and they came with a thirst for revenge. "Remember," Jhoenel said, "we're not here to be heroes. We're here to buy time for the innocents. When they're safe, we get out of here." "Understood," Cole and Wyatt replied in unison. The final battle was about to begin, and the fate of dozens of innocent people depended on the courage and skill of three men who had chosen to fight for justice in a world where injustice often prevailed. The sound of horse hooves echoed through the valley like war drums, announcing the arrival of Desert Serpents reinforcements. Jhoenel, Cole, and Wyatt positioned themselves strategically among the complex buildings, using every piece of available cover to maximize their chances of survival. They knew they were outnumbered, but they also knew that experience and determination could make up for a lot. 12 men, Cole counted, watching through a crack in the wooden wall, all well-armed and looking unfriendly. 13, Wyatt corrected, pointing to a rider appearing behind the others. "And that one in front looks like the leader." Jhoenel studied the man Wyatt had indicated. He was tall and thin, with a well-groomed black beard and eyes that gleamed with cruel intelligence. There was something in his posture that suggested authority and combat experience. "Must be Jawbone's second in command," Jhoenel murmured. "Now that the boss is dead, he'll want revenge." The riders stopped at the complex entrance, clearly assessing the situation. They could see the bodies of dead guards scattered around the place, the open barracks doors, and obvious signs that the prisoners had escaped. "Strangers!" the leader shouted, his voice echoing through the valley. "I know you're there. My name is Marcus Steele, and I was Jawbone's right-hand man. You killed my boss and freed our property. This won't stand." "Property?" Wyatt murmured, his voice loaded with indignation. "He's talking about people like they were cattle. That's exactly how they see them," Jhoenel replied. "For men like these, human life has no value beyond what it can produce in profit." Steele continued shouting, "You have a chance to get out of this alive. Hand over the boy and tell us where the workers are, and maybe I'll let you leave with just a few bullets in your legs." "How generous," Cole commented sarcastically. "I think I'll decline the offer." Jhoenel positioned himself so his voice could be heard clearly. "Steele, your boss is dead, your prisoners are free, and your dirty business is over. You have a chance to ride away from here and never come back." Steele's response was a cold laugh. "You don't understand, stranger. The Desert Serpents never retreat, never, and we always collect our debts." "Then you'll collect that debt in hell," Jhoenel replied. The silence that followed was tense and loaded with expectation. It was the kind of moment that precedes violence, when men make decisions that can't be undone and prepare for consequences that might be fatal. It was Steele who broke the silence, gesturing to his men. Immediately, the riders spread out, seeking positions that would give them tactical advantage. They were professionals, Jhoenel realized, not just common bandits. This made the situation even more dangerous. "They know what they're doing," Cole observed, seeing how the men moved with military coordination. "So do we," Wyatt replied, adjusting his rifle sight, "and we have something they don't have." "What?" Jhoenel asked. "A just cause." The first shot came from one of the watchtowers, where one of Steele's men had positioned himself. The bullet hit the wooden wall near Cole's head, sending splinters flying in all directions. "Well," Cole said, cleaning the debris from his face, "looks like the conversation is over." The battle that followed was intense and chaotic. Steele's men attacked from multiple directions, using their numerical superiority to try to surround the three gunslingers. But Jhoenel, Cole, and Wyatt had fought together before, and their coordination was almost telepathic. Wyatt, with his legendary precision, eliminated the shooter in the tower with a single accurate shot. Cole, using his experience in urban combat, moved from cover to cover, flanking the attackers and forcing them to constantly reposition. Jhoenel held the center, his speed in drawing being the difference between life and death in several crucial moments. But even with all their skill, the three men knew they couldn't maintain that pace indefinitely. They had limited ammunition, and Steele's men seemed determined to fight to the last man. "We need to get out of here," Cole shouted during a brief pause in the shooting. "We can't win a war of attrition." "Agreed," Wyatt replied, quickly reloading his rifle. "But how? They have all the exits covered." Jhoenel looked around, his mind working furiously to find a solution. It was then that he saw something that gave him an idea. Barrels of gunpowder stacked near what had been the mine's supply depot. "See those barrels over there?" he shouted, pointing. "If we can make them explode, it'll create enough confusion for us to escape," Cole completed, immediately understanding the plan. "But how do we get there?" "I'll go," Wyatt said. "I'm the fastest of the three of us." "No," Jhoenel protested. "It's too dangerous." "All of this is dangerous," Wyatt replied with a grim smile. "But someone has to do it." Before Jhoenel or Cole could protest further, Wyatt ran from his position, zigzagging between buildings while bullets whistled around him. His speed and agility were impressive, but Jhoenel could see that some of the shots were coming dangerously close. Wyatt reached the barrels and quickly began working, using a small explosive charge he carried for emergency situations. But just as he was finishing, one of Steele's men appeared behind him, weapon drawn. "Wyatt!" Jhoenel shouted, but it was too late for a warning to make a difference. The shot echoed through the valley, and Wyatt staggered, holding his wounded shoulder. But even injured, he managed to complete his task, lighting the fuse that would lead to the explosion. "Run!" he shouted. 15 seconds! Jhoenel and Cole left their positions, running toward Wyatt, while Steele's men, realizing the danger, also began moving away from the barrels. The countdown in everyone's minds made each second an eternity. Jhoenel reached Wyatt first, helping his wounded friend to his feet. "Can you run?" "I can try," Wyatt replied through gritted teeth. They ran together, Cole covering their retreat with precise shots that kept the pursuers at bay. When the explosion finally happened, it was much more powerful than anyone had expected. The blast was deafening, and the shockwave knocked everyone in the valley down. Pieces of wood and metal flew in all directions, and a cloud of dust and smoke covered everything like a thick blanket. When the dust began to settle, Jhoenel slowly got up, checking if Cole and Wyatt were okay. Wyatt was pale from blood loss but conscious. Cole had taken some scratches but nothing serious. "What about the others?" Wyatt asked, looking around. Of the 13 men who had attacked the complex, only 5 were still standing. The explosion had eliminated or seriously wounded the others, and the survivors seemed dazed and disoriented. Steele was among the survivors, but he had lost his hat and his arrogance. Blood flowed from a cut on his forehead, and his eyes showed for the first time something that could be fear. "It's over, Steele," Jhoenel shouted through the smoke. "Your men are dead or wounded. There's nothing left here for you." "This isn't over," Steele shouted back, but his voice lacked the previous confidence. "The Desert Serpents have tentacles throughout the territory. Others will come." "Let them come," Cole replied, helping Wyatt to his feet. "We'll be waiting." Steele looked around, seeing his fallen men and realizing the situation had become unsustainable. With an angry gesture, he mounted his horse and signaled for the survivors to follow him. "This isn't over," he shouted one last time before spurring his horse and leaving, followed by the few men who could still ride. Jhoenel, Cole, and Wyatt stood in the middle of the destruction, breathing heavily and processing what had happened. They had won, but the cost had been high, and everyone knew this victory was just the beginning of a larger war. "We need to get out of here," Cole said, looking at Wyatt's wound. "He needs medical attention. And we need to catch up with Peter and the others," Jhoenel added. "They might be in danger if some of Steele's men decide to pursue them." They headed to where they had left their horses, moving as fast as Wyatt's wound allowed. The mountain trail Peter had used to guide the prisoners was steep and difficult, but it was also the safest route away from the mine complex. As they rode, Jhoenel couldn't stop thinking about Peter. The boy had shown extraordinary courage, but he was still just a child carrying a burden no child should carry. The responsibility of caring for him and helping him heal weighed on Jhoenel like a sacred promise. "You're thinking about the boy," Cole observed, noticing his friend's worried expression. "I am. He's been through so much, lost so much. How does a child recover from something like this?" "The same way we recover," Wyatt said, his voice weak but firm. "One day at a time with help from people who care." "Do you think he'll be okay?" "I think he has something special," Cole replied. "I saw it in his eyes, an inner strength that not even all this tragedy could break. With the right guidance, he could become an extraordinary man." They rode in silence for another hour before finally hearing voices ahead. It was Peter, guiding the group of freed prisoners through a particularly difficult part of the trail. "Be careful with the loose rocks here," they heard Peter say, "and hold on to the smaller children. The fall is deep." When Jhoenel saw Peter again, he felt a wave of relief and pride. The boy was dirty and tired, but there was a new confidence in his posture. He had found a purpose, a way to transform his pain into something positive. "Peter!" Jhoenel called. The boy turned and ran toward the three gunslingers, his face lighting up with joy and relief. "You made it, you're alive." "We made it," Jhoenel confirmed, dismounting and hugging the boy. "And you did an incredible job guiding all these people." Peter looked at Wyatt, noticing the wound. "Is he okay?" "I'll be fine," Wyatt said with a weak smile. "I've been through worse." "How many people did we manage to free?" Cole asked. 43, Peter replied with pride, "including 12 children. They're all safe now." Jhoenel looked at the group of people Peter had guided there. They were men, women, and children of all ages, united only by the suffering they had shared and the hope for a better future. Their faces showed exhaustion and trauma, but also gratitude and renewed determination. An elderly woman approached, the same one who had been the first to trust Peter. "Sir," she said to Jhoenel, "we have no words to thank you for what you've done for us. You gave us back our lives." "You don't need to thank us," Jhoenel replied. "We only did what was right. But how can we repay you? We have no money, no possessions." "Live," Jhoenel said simply. "Live well, take care of your families, be happy. That's the only repayment we want." A young man stepped forward carrying a small child in his arms. "My daughter was getting sick in the mines. I don't know if she would have survived much longer. You saved her life." Jhoenel looked at the child, who couldn't be more than 5 years old. Her big, innocent eyes reminded him of why he had chosen to fight against injustice. Each life saved, each smile restored, each family reunited. These were the true rewards of his choice. "Where are you going now?" Peter asked the group. "Some of us have families in other towns," the elderly woman replied. "Others, well, we'll have to start over somewhere." "Redemption Gulch needs good people," Jhoenel suggested. "The town is growing, and there are opportunities for those who want to work honestly. Do you think we would be welcome?" "I'm sure of it. Father Miguel will help you get established." As the group prepared to continue the journey back to civilization, Jhoenel stepped aside with Peter for a private conversation. "Peter," he said, kneeling to be at the boy's eye level, "I want you to know I'm very proud of you, what you did today, the courage you showed, the way you took care of these people. Your mother would be very proud." Tears welled up in Peter's eyes, but they were tears of gratitude, not sadness. "Mr. Jhoenel, when I was guiding these people, especially the children, I felt like my mother was with me, like she was helping me find the way." "Maybe she was," Jhoenel said softly. "A mother's love doesn't die with the body. It lives in the hearts of her children, guiding them even when she's no longer physically present." "What's going to happen now? With the Desert Serpents, I mean." Jhoenel sighed, looking toward the horizon where Steele and his surviving men had disappeared. "They'll try to regroup, maybe seek revenge, but we destroyed the heart of their operation. Without Jawbone, without the base in the mines, without the prisoners who generated profit, they're just another gang of bandits. What if they come back? If they come back, we'll be ready. But Peter, I want you to understand something important. Violence should always be the last resort. What we did today was necessary to save innocent lives, but it's not something we should seek or celebrate. Peter nodded, showing impressive maturity for his age. I understand. My mother always said true strength lies in protecting the weak, not in hurting the strong. Your mother was a wise woman. They rejoined the group, and the journey back to Redemption Gulch continued. The path was long and difficult, but there was a sense of hope in the air that made each step lighter. Wyatt, despite his wound, kept morale high with stories and jokes that made even the children laugh. Cole helped the weakest negotiate the most difficult parts of the trail, and Jhoenel walked beside Peter, watching how the boy interacted with the other children in the group, offering comfort and encouragement with a naturalness that revealed his exceptional character. When they finally spotted Redemption Gulch on the horizon, a collective sigh of relief rose from the group. The town seemed small and insignificant in the distance, but for those people it represented safety, a new beginning, a chance to rebuild their lives. Father Miguel was waiting at the town entrance, clearly anxious for news. When he saw the group approaching, his face lit up with joy and gratitude. "Thank God," he murmured, making the sign of the cross. "You succeeded." "We did," Jhoenel confirmed. "But Wyatt needs medical attention, and these people will need shelter and food." Of course. I've already prepared the church to receive as many people as necessary, and Dr. Sarah is already on her way to care for the wounded." In the hours that followed, Redemption Gulch transformed into a center of compassionate activity. The town's residents, inspired by the courage of the three gunslingers and touched by the refugees' situation, came together to offer help. Homes were opened, food was shared, and plans were made to help families either settle permanently or continue their journeys to reunite with lost relatives. Peter found himself at the center of much attention, being praised for his courage and leadership. But Jhoenel noticed the boy seemed more interested in helping others than receiving praise. It was another sign of his exceptional character. That night, when the commotion finally died down and the town calmed, Jhoenel found Peter sitting on the church steps, looking at the stars. "Can't sleep?" Jhoenel asked, sitting beside the boy. "I'm thinking," Peter replied, "about everything that happened, everything that changed. And what are you thinking? That maybe my mother didn't die in vain. If she hadn't discovered what the Desert Serpents were doing, if she hadn't tried to do the right thing, all those people would still be trapped in the mines." Jhoenel felt a lump in his throat. Peter's wisdom and maturity continued to surprise him. "You're right, Peter. Your mother was a hero, and you're following in her footsteps." "Mr. Jhoenel, can I ask a question?" "Of course." "When you said I could stay with you, were you serious?" "Completely serious." "If you want, Peter, I would very much like to be your guardian, to teach you everything I know about how to distinguish right from wrong, how to defend yourself, how to be a man of honor." Peter was silent for a long moment, processing the offer. "And Cole and Wyatt? Will they stay too?" "For a while, yes. They want to make sure the Desert Serpents don't try to take revenge, but eventually they'll have to follow their own paths. And us? What will be our path?" Jhoenel looked at the starry sky, thinking about the question. "That depends on you, Peter. We can stay here in Redemption Gulch, help the town grow and prosper, or we can travel, help other people who need justice. The important thing is that whatever path we choose, we'll walk it together." Peter smiled, and for the first time since his mother's death, it was a genuine smile full of hope. "I'd like to stay here for a while. I think Redemption Gulch needs good people, and I want to help these families we freed get established." "That's a wise choice," Jhoenel said, placing his hand on the boy's shoulder, "and it shows you have your heart in the right place." They sat in comfortable silence for a few more minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. The future was still uncertain, and there were challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long time, both felt there was hope. 3 months later, Redemption Gulch had completely transformed. The families freed from the mines had integrated into the community, bringing new skills and renewed energy to the town. A new sheriff had been elected, an honest man who worked closely with Jhoenel to maintain peace. Peter had grown not just physically, but also in confidence and maturity. Jhoenel was teaching him to shoot, to ride better, and more importantly, to think critically about issues of justice and morality. The boy showed a natural aptitude for leadership, often mediating disputes among other children and helping adults with various tasks. Cole had left 2 weeks earlier, called to help with a situation in a neighboring town, but he had promised to return for visits, and Peter knew he could always count on him if needed. Wyatt had fully recovered from his wound and decided to stay in Redemption Gulch permanently. He had fallen in love with the local blacksmith's daughter, a gentlewoman named Mary, and they were planning to marry in the fall. "It's funny how life works," Wyatt said one afternoon, while he, Jhoenel, and Peter worked on building a new school for the town. "I came here expecting a battle and ended up finding a home. Sometimes the best things in life come when we least expect them," Jhoenel replied. Watching Peter teach a group of younger children how to use hammer and nails safely. "And sometimes," Peter added, looking at the two men who had become his family, "the worst things that happen to us end up leading to the best." That night, during dinner at the house Jhoenel had bought in town, Peter asked a question that had been on his mind for weeks. "Mr. Jhoenel, do you think the Desert Serpents will come back?" Jhoenel considered the question carefully before answering. "Honestly, Peter, I don't know. Steele and the men who survived might try to regroup, or they might have learned their lesson and decided to look for less dangerous business. But if they come back, we'll be ready. What if they bring more men? An entire army? Then we'll fight an entire army. But remember, Peter, we're not alone anymore. We have an entire community that has learned the value of freedom and is willing to fight for it." Peter nodded, but Jhoenel could see there was still concern in his eyes. It was natural. The boy had lost so much that the fear of losing again was understandable. "Peter," Jhoenel said gently, "can I tell you a secret?" "Of course. I'm afraid sometimes too. Afraid of not being strong enough, of not being wise enough, of failing when people need me." Peter seemed surprised. "But you're the bravest man I know. Courage isn't the absence of fear, son. Courage is doing the right thing despite fear, and you've already shown more courage than many adult men I've known." "How so?" "You lost your mother in the most terrible way possible. But instead of letting yourself be consumed by anger or despair, you chose to help other people. You guided 43 people to safety, risked your own life to do the right thing, and now you're dedicating your time to helping our community grow. That's true courage." Tears welled up in Peter's eyes, but they were tears of gratitude and pride. "Thank you for teaching me that. For teaching me I can transform my pain into something good. You didn't need me to teach you that, Peter. You already knew. I just helped you see what was already inside you." 6 months later, on a clear spring morning, a lone rider arrived in Redemption Gulch. He was a young man, perhaps in his 20s, with worn traveling clothes and eyes that had seen much suffering. He stopped in front of the sheriff's office and asked for Jhoenel. When directed to the school where Jhoenel was helping Peter teach the children, the young rider was surprised. "You're Jhoenel?" he asked, clearly expecting someone different. "I am. How can I help you?" "My name is David Carson. I come from Silver Creek, 3 days' ride south. Our town is being terrorized by a gang called the Night Wolves. They're doing the same things the Desert Serpents did: slave labor, extortion, murders. We heard about what you did here, and we came to ask for help." Jhoenel looked at Peter, who had stopped teaching and was listening to the conversation attentively. The boy, now 13 and visibly stronger and more confident, met Jhoenel's eyes and nodded almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Carson," Jhoenel said, "I'll need a few days to organize things here, but yes, we'll help." "We?" David asked, looking at Peter. "Peter is my partner," Jhoenel explained. "He has more experience dealing with this kind of situation than many adult men." David seemed skeptical, but didn't argue. He had ridden 3 days looking for help and wasn't in a position to question the methods of those willing to offer it. That night, Jhoenel and Peter sat on their house porch, planning the trip to Silver Creek. Wyatt had offered to go along, but Jhoenel had suggested he stay to protect Redemption Gulch in their absence. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Jhoenel asked Peter. "There's no shame in wanting to stay here where it's safe." "I'm sure," Peter replied without hesitation. "Those people in Silver Creek are going through the same thing as the families we freed from the mines. If we can help, we have an obligation to do so." "It could be dangerous. The night wolves might be even worse than the Desert Serpents." "Then it's even more important that we stop them." Peter looked at Jhoenel with a determination that reminded him of his mother. "You taught me that sometimes we have to fight for what's right, even when it's difficult." "Especially when it's difficult," Jhoenel smiled, feeling a mixture of pride and concern. Peter had become everything he had hoped for, and more. The scared, lost boy he had found carrying a bloody sack through the streets of Redemption Gulch had transformed into a brave and compassionate young man, ready to fight for justice. "All right," Jhoenel said finally. "We leave tomorrow at dawn." "Jhoenel," Peter said, using the name without the formal title for the first time. "Thank you." "For what?" "For giving me a family again. For teaching me that even after the greatest loss, it's still possible to find purpose and happiness. For showing me I can honor my mother's memory by helping other people." Jhoenel felt a lump in his throat. "Thank you, Peter, for reminding me why I chose this path, for showing me that sometimes the best things in life come from the most difficult moments." They sat in silence, watching the stars appear in the dark sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, new opportunities to make a difference. But tonight, they were simply a man and the young man who had become like a son to him, united by a common cause and a bond that transcended blood. The next morning, when they left Redemption Gulch, the entire town came to say goodbye. The families they had freed from the mines were there, as well as the original town residents who had learned to respect and admire them. "Come back soon," Father Miguel said, blessing them before departure. "And may God protect you on your journey." "We'll be back," Peter promised, "and we'll bring more people who need a new beginning." As they rode out of town, Jhoenel looked back one last time. Redemption Gulch had become more than just a town for him. It had become a home, a symbol that it was possible to build something good even in the most unlikely places. "Ready for the next adventure?" he asked Peter. "Ready," Peter replied, his voice firm and confident. "Let's show the night wolves that there are some things in this world that can't be bought, sold, or stolen." "And what are those things?" Peter smiled, repeating the words Jhoenel had taught him months before. "Freedom, human dignity, and the courage to fight for what's right." They spurred their horses and headed toward the horizon where Silver Creek awaited them. Behind them, Redemption Gulch continued its peaceful life, a testament to what was possible when good people came together to fight against injustice. And somewhere in the distant mountains, other people in danger awaited heroes they might not even know existed. But Jhoenel and Peter knew, and that was enough, because sometimes the difference between hope and despair is simply knowing that someone cares enough to fight. The road ahead was long and uncertain, full of dangers and challenges they couldn't yet imagine, but they would travel it together, as family, as partners in the search for justice, as guardians of hope in a world that sometimes seemed to have lost its way. And maybe, just maybe, they could make a difference. One person at a time, one family at a time, one town at a time. Because in the end, that's how the world changed. Not through grand gestures or grandiose proclamations, but through simple acts of courage and compassion performed by ordinary people who refused to accept that injustice was inevitable. The sun rose in the sky, illuminating the path ahead, and Jhoenel and Peter rode toward the future, ready to face whatever challenge awaited them. Because they had learned the most important truth of all, that even in the darkest hours, there is always hope for those who have courage enough to look for it. If you enjoyed this story of courage, overcoming, and justice in the Old West, please like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional narratives that touch the heart and inspire the soul.